welcome to another edition of Did You Know Doctor Who? What you may not know about Doctor Who. This time we're going to have a look at a two-parter in Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks, the second of the Cult of Skaro trilogy. I hope you enjoy. Stephen Moffat was originally going to write for this story, but was unable to as he was working on Blink. Therefore, Helen Rayner was brought in, being the first woman to write a Dalek story. Whilst many shots were filmed in New York itself, David Tennant and Freema Agyeman filmed all their scenes in Wales, never once setting foot in New York. The working title for the first part was originally Daleks in New York, but it was changed due to the fact that it was easier to say Manhattan. Although various Dalek Emperors, Dalek Supremes, the Dalek Creator Davros, and even the Dalek Commander have appeared multiple times over the years, the Daleks of the Cult of Skaro were the first individual recurring Daleks. The cliffhanger of part 1 of the appearance of the humanoid Dalek was spoiled when the production team chose to feature an image of it on the cover of that week's Radio Times. Other than the name, the Cult of Skaro, this is the first time that the reference to the planet Skaro has been mentioned on screen in a new series. The last time was in the movie. Russell T Davies has suggested that the Daleks' arrival on the Empire State Building in The Chase planted the idea for their eventual influence over its construction. This story includes the first location filming outside the United Kingdom in the Revival era. A major set piece saw Tallulah discover a cage full of remnants of the Daleks' failed genetic experiments, but this was dropped due to the expense. Towards the beginning of the story, the character Solomon breaks a piece of bread in half with the two men fighting over it. This is an analogue to the biblical story of Solomon threatening to cut a baby in half for two women both claiming it. Solomon calls $1 a day slave wages. For perspective, the fortunate few who worked building the Empire State Building earned $2 an hour for tradesmen like masons and steel workers, and $1 an hour for the unskilled labourers. It was discovered at the last minute that no hands had been ordered for Eric Lauren's costume as the hybrid Sec, and so the actor was given a pair of black gloves to wear for the scenes in which Diagoras is absorbed by Sec. Subsequently, however, it was realised that the panic was all for naught. The hands had been fabricated after all. Helen Rayner had originally envisioned the TARDIS materialising on the roof of the Broadway Theatre, but amended this to the base of the Statue of Liberty. Originally, much of the action around the speakeasies was proliferated during the Prohibition, including having Laszlo involved with the mob. However, Russell T Davies wanted to avoid the jazz music, which would have been prominent during such an environment, and so Helen Rayner came up with the Broadway and Hooverville settings instead. This is the first time since the Daleks' debut story that one of them has actually considered leaving their shell. Frank is played by Andrew Garfield, who's close friends with Matt Smith, who would later go on to play the 11th Doctor. This is the first Revival series story to use the classic of the Daleks title format. When the cult revolts against Sec for unexplained reasons on screen, Nicholas Briggs changed his depiction of Dalek Khan's voice from a deep and raspy to the equivalent of Dalek Sec's pitch, and never reverts to the original tone. During David Tennant's video diary for this episode, while it was in mid-production, Briggs revealed that Khan's voice started to go up higher because he was becoming commander of the group, and thus changed in demeanour. Personally, Briggs did this to mediate the painful toll on his throat from continuing to do the gruff impersonation. Briggs chose the gravelly portrayal during Khan's debut back in Series 2, knowing he only had one line, and discussed the business of altering his voice with Russell T Davies. Likewise, he made sure that Dalek Jas would have the least lines because his ridiculous-sounding high-pitched voice. This is the first two-part story in the Revival series to not feature the inside of the TARDIS. A deleted scene involved the return of the Doctor, Martha and Frank to the Hooverville, with Tallulah in tow, and saw the Doctor admitted to Tallulah that he was unable to reverse Laszlo's transformation. It was cut because it had been shot late in the day and the light was so insufficient. Laszlo was originally supposed to die. Russell T Davies asked Helen Rayner to alter this, as he felt the development was too depressing for the show's ethos. Although set in 1930, the Doctor uses his time travel privilege to throw around the term genocide, which wouldn't be coined until 1944 by Raphael Lemkin. As I mentioned before, Dalek Sec is actually the Metaltron prop, and what's an interesting parallel is how both Daleks redeemed themselves and became more quote-unquote human. Another rather humorous parallel is that Andrew Garfield would return to New York to play Spider-Man in The Amazing Spider-Man, where ironically the plot revolves around Lizard trying to turn people into half-human lizard hybrids in the next step of so-called evolution, similar to the Daleks' plan here. And that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Daleks in Manhattan / Evolution of the Daleks is considered by quite a lot of people as the weakest Dalek story in the Russell T Davies era. And I kind of agree. It is definitely the weakest of all the Dalek stories in the Russell T Davies era. Obviously the Moffat era had far worse Dalek stories, but we haven't really got to those ones just yet. Daleks in Manhattan / Evolution Daleks is still an okay story, it's still watchable. I quite like the idea that the Daleks are starting to figure out what we keep losing, so why don't we try to evolve ourselves? Why don't we try to, make ourselves better? And of course, the Dalek mentality is that we're the purebloods, we're, the supreme beings and all that. And so a lot of them feel very conflicted. At some point, they feel like maybe we should follow through with this plan, but at the same time, they feel like, well, maybe we shouldn't, because, of course, it goes against our ideology. And so it becomes an ideological battle between them. And I quite like the Dalek hybrid look. I know a lot of people take the piss out of it, but I think the makeup is actually really well done. I think it's, slimy, it's grotesque, it's horrible, but it's actually really well done, and I think it's kind of underrated in that sense. I think people are just kind of bitching for the sake of bitching when it comes to that. But nonetheless, it is kind of a generic story. The use of those Human-Dalek soldiers, I thought was kind of an interesting idea, it sort of reminded me of the Robo-Men from the Invasion of Earth, but at the same time, it was something that just sort of got, thrown away almost. It was barely utilized, barely used. It was kind of pointless almost. All the Daleks end up dying except for Dalek Can, which of course leads into the Stolen Earth, which is a great idea. Obviously, we need to have at least one Dalek survive. And it does keep the mystery up for what is to come. And thankfully, the Stolen Earth / Journey's End is absolutely fantastic. So, gotta wait till we get onto that story, and I'm hoping there's gonna be loads of facts for it. But nonetheless, I have mixed feelings on Daleks in Manhattan / Evolution Daleks. There are moments which I like. There are things that I like. I like some of the ideas. It's one of those stories where the ideas sound great on paper or sound interesting, but the execution wasn't as great as you might think it is. So, yeah, a bit of a mixed reaction towards this story, but nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this edition of Did You Know Doctor Who, and I'll see you next time.